Just check one thing. Okay. Welcome to the Living a Fit Life podcast, episode 60. I'm your host, Chad Mueller, and today we are sitting down with Jess Cullen, hot off the trail of Jess winning an Ironman Canada race. And of course, joining Jess is the mastermind behind her training and her husband, Mark Cullen. Jess, how are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. Thanks. It's been pretty exciting. It's still wrapping my head around it.
Yes, congratulations on the amazing feat. I'm really excited to dive into your story today. And Mark, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Thanks for having me back on the podcast again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while.
Going again on here.
Yes, we've rallied through some CrossFit events recently, but we've talked about we were just talking about before we went live of having the dynamic duo on live on the podcast. So we're 2 weeks post Ironman win? Is it 2 weeks now?
I think so.
Yeah.
Mark's the details man. Is it about 2 weeks, Mark?
10 days approximately.
There we go.
Approximately 10 days.
Amazing. How are you feeling, Jess?
You know what? I'm feeling great. I always find that Ironmans are a little bit less wear and tear on your body than the shorter stuff, at least in terms of the soreness afterward. I find that Ironmans are a little bit more systemic. So it's just taking the time to eat, sleep, just recover, chill. So workouts are way more chill, but yeah, like feeling like body's feeling amazing. And yeah, just overall feeling sort of like elated. Like it was still like pinching myself.
Awesome. I have to ask, how many days of rest recovery did you do after the Ironman? Like, I mean, like no running, no biking, no nothing.
Well, I did. So I'll tell you, only because this is a perfect segue. The recovery was on point for for the Ironman. The day after, there's a river near where we are, and there's and mountain ranges. So we had some drinks and we went in the floaties and we floated for like 4 hours down the river. So that was brilliant Ironman recovery. The day after that was wine tours, and the day after that we flew home. So it was about 4 days of 3 full days. The fourth day I went on a ride with Mark and the club.
Okay. All right. That's an appropriate amount of time to take rest, I think. Yeah. Time to reflect and enjoy. Awesome. Okay, cool. I like that. I always wonder if you crazy endurance folk, when you guys throttle a massive competition, if it's like one day and then it's like the next day you want to get back onto it because you guys are so used to the volume. I've always wondered.
You know
about
what?
that.
Yes, when I was less of a mature athlete, and I'm not calling myself old, but like the more that you like actually just learn of the science of it, I'm like, I want to be the best I can be and I want to go fast. So to do that, you need to have really good recovery cycles. So like I'm actually pretty hardcore about my recovery. So I'm totally fine with taking days off.
Okay, cool. Okay. And Mark, I know you've shared this in your socials a lot, but like how amazing was the race day from a fan, coach, sort of spectator experience for Jess winning the Ironman Canada?
Yeah, I wasn't sure what the day would be like. I've never really spectated like a long Ironman type of day like that as a coach and having like 6 athletes on the course. So I figured it was going to be a bit of a nerve-wracking day. And then, man, right away as those like splits were coming in early, I was like, this is going to be a crazy day. So, man, it was 10 hours of just like watching the tracker, like so pumped up, but so nervous. And then just following that through the run and like seeing Jess like realizing what she was doing in the moment and like taking it all in was definitely, it made it by far like the best day of triathlon I've ever been a part of, like racing or spectating. Like it was just so cool to like watch that in action, and obviously like to have it one of your athletes who's also your wife doing it is a pretty amazing moment. So yeah, I was on the verge of tears all day. It was a pretty amazing day, one I won't soon forget, that's for sure, and will be hard to be topped.
So spectating is more stressful than actually racing.
Yes, 100%. Like I've just as at great races where I've been on course and you can't really like you're just focusing on executing your day, where there like you have no power over like what is going
Right.
on. So you're just just waiting for splits to come in and waiting for 5.5 hours on a bike ride where there isn't a whole lot of splits and you're just praying they get through with no mechanical trouble. So yeah, spectating far harder.
Yeah, I'd much rather be racing for sure.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. Yeah, so today we're going to dive into obviously the race. I want to learn more about your story, Jess. I was going to ask Mark quickly before we jumped into that. Just like, obviously, it's a big deal, Ironman Canada. Like, how were you feeling before the day? You said you had 6 athletes, so like, did you sort of anticipate that this was going to be a big race day for the club? Like, you're feeling pretty good going to that day?
Yeah, I think I was really nervous about the day because I knew that the group had put in so much work towards it and they were all so ready for the race. It's one thing when somebody's like showing up and they're maybe not prepared for a race. Like you don't put a whole lot of stock in it. You're like, okay, do the best you can on the day. But like this group was very ready to do well on this day. And I had watched them, so many of them live in KW or I keep in close touch with if they don't. And most of them work one-on-one with me who are racing that race. So like I was very dialed into what their ability levels were and was very invested in that day. So it was, I knew it could be a special day. That's why I was so nervous. And it was definitely exciting to follow along all day.
Yeah, it sounds like a big day all around for both of you. So that's super awesome. And yeah, I want to dive into the race details in a little bit, but I quickly, Jess, I wanted to kind of understand. A lot of times when we have these podcasts, we obviously want to hear about, how you got to where you are today, right? Like, and a lot of people have similar stories to some sense, but I'm curious what your sort of athletic background is and how you've sort of, become the winner of Ironman Canada.
Well, what surprises a lot of people is that I wasn't athletic at all as a child. Like I wasn't even on like a pickup soccer team or anything. I didn't really play any organized sports until high school gym class. I was raised conservative Mennonite, so actually not super competitive background at all. So in fact, competitive sports were discouraged a little bit. So didn't really realize how competitive I was till we let that loose later in life. But my very first half marathon was in university, actually. And I was joking. It was like at a party, and a bunch of my friends were talking about that they were going to be racing. I was living abroad for my 3rd year, and I said, sure, why not? So it was not a brilliant first foray into running, but I really loved it, and the second that I, started running, I just fell in love with it. I was one of those annoying people that just liked running right away. So then I was quickly drawn into sort of like the ultra stuff. Like I did a race called the Trans Rockies 120 miler, which is like in Colorado in the mountains. And then I started getting into like the adventure racing stuff, which is like multi-day sleep deprivation. Lots of, that's where you're sort of tackling the mental side of going really, really long. So it was cool to be able to hone that long before I did Ironman. So by the time I got to Ironmans, they actually felt pretty short.
So the adventure runs, sorry, tell me more about this. Like these are like, adventure runs. What is this? So you're running and then you're not sleeping, you're running, you're sleeping.
So adventure races is like this wild type of racing. It's so fun. And you can do a bunch of different, it's anywhere from a 6-hour race to like the world championship event is 7 days. So it's 4 or 5 sports. So it's like hiking or trail running, mountain biking, paddling, rock climbing, and then orienteering. And you have teams. The professional way to do it is teams of 4. And you would be, you don't know the start or finish line before you're handed the maps, and then you have checkpoints. So basically the team that traverses the distance in the fastest amount of time and gets all the checkpoints is the one that wins. So you need to come up with strategies as a team. And then once you get into the multi-day, you need to have a sleep strategy. And and it's this whole other, it's a whole sidebar. I learned everything I know about leadership from adventure racing too. It's like communication. And it really introduced that whole idea of team sport to me in endurance, which is why community is so important. So I was really big into this because it's such a fascinating sport. It does take a lot out of you to do. Like my longest amount of time going without sleeping, I think was like 64 hours. And then we were forced actually just because of a water crossing at night to take like a 1 hour nap, and then we finished. But like needing to be able to push through that level of fatigue, I think like it set me up because like I've got to tell you, having the background that I do in sport, I get to a start line and I'm like, I know how to suffer more than any one of my competitors here because I have gone to the darkest places possible. So I think that I carry a little bit of that with me at the start line. We lost him. We'll wait. Yeah, for sure. So then after adventure racing, I started dabbling into like cycling. So that was where I sort of transitioned from mountain biking to a little bit more of, it was like I did some road racing. I did something called crit racing, which is, again, it's completely different than adventure racing, but it's high impact. It's like over in 1 hour. It's that adrenaline and, high crash rate, which is it was just so fun. So some of my success there, I did I podiumed at the TT provincial championships. I got third place there, and then I actually won my category in crit provincials. And so then I started this is around the time that I ended up with Mark, and we both tried a triathlon. And I always had people saying, "Oh, you'd be so good if you just focus." And the thing is, like my specialty is in not focusing, which is why triathlon is the perfect sport for me. Is that I love that there's 3 sports I need to master in one, or else I would still be out there doing adventure racing and mountain biking and crit racing. And if it's not structured, it's not going to come together into one sport. So it's really, it gives me like all that diversity that I crave in sports. So that's a bit about my background. As I do, yes. Oh gosh. So well, and I would view all of those as different sports. So I'll start with triathlon. The one that I started when I started triathlon was Mark. It was 2016 that we did our first one.
Yeah, 2016 we did Muskoka 70.3 was our first race.
Yeah. And in my head, I was like, I'm a runner that's trying triathlon because I'm in that phase of like, I'll try any sport in endurance world. And then I'll just go back to running when I'm done. But I'm hooked, 5 or 6 years later, I'm still here. So yeah, it's been a fun journey.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like, yeah, I mean, I guess I have to ask, like, I always, for me, not being an endurance athlete at this moment, I talk to Adam and Mark a lot of times about this, like, and I always ask the question and everyone kind of laughs, like why do you put yourself through this sort of pain? Why do you do this sport that requires so much time, investment, volume, right? There's lots of other fitness and other sports to be healthy that doesn't take up nearly the amount of time as a sport like this does. So like, why do you do this? Like, what's your why, I guess?
Yeah. Well, I would say like overall, one of my whys in life in general is to reach my potential and help other people reach theirs. So the thing that I love about triathlon is that it really is hard. And I think one of the reasons I'm drawn to it is because it takes time. Because if it was really easy, then everyone would do it. And I think that that's why I gravitate towards it is, I choose this sport because it feels like a little bit of an Everest. It takes, you can't fake a fit body. You can't fake, all of the work that it takes to put three sports together into one. And for me, that's kind of a triumph to be able to do that. And for me, it's a way of practicing out success in other areas of life because in every area of life, you're balancing more than just one thing. So I kind of get to practice that in a small way with triathlon of balancing three different sports. It's how are you going to do, balance different things in life and then overcome those obstacles and put it all together. So yeah, it takes a long time, but it's not just about the sport. It's just all the things. I think it just makes me a better person too.
It's a great answer. Great answer. I have to ask a little segue here, but have you guys ever heard of High Rocks?
Yes. And yes, we'll do it one day.
All right. Cool. All right.
Let's do it together. I'm in.
That sounds good.
Heard it here too.
I was actually going to do it this year just for fun. And then I recently have been thinking about it more. I'm like, I think there's a lot of athletes in our community that would probably like cross over. Because I heard someone say in High Rocks, they said, I'm not strong enough for CrossFit. I'm a really good runner, but like my endurance isn't great. So High Rocks is perfect or something. I was like, there's a lot of people that are kind of in that middle hybrid round. So it's like, I was like, I should ask Mark and Jess about this.
We're all
try anything.
Cool. It sounds like you guys would try anything. I mean, but we'll keep you focused on your goals for sure. So I think everyone probably wants to hear more about your story specifically to the race. I'm sure you've talked about it a lot. I'm sure you've sort of had a chance to debrief. I'm curious, obviously, to hear both Jess and Mark, your sort of experiences throughout the day. And so, yeah, like maybe can we start with the race? Like, how was, like you were saying, I think you said in one of your posts, I know you gave a good debrief. So if anybody hasn't checked out Jess online and Instagram, we'll definitely throw a link in a podcast description. But like maybe if you guys can give me some sense of like the training leading up to the race. I know you guys, you're consistently training. I know you have multiple different races throughout the season, but maybe if you can sort of just give us a little bit background on what training was like up to this race specifically, how it was going, all that sort of stuff. And we'll jump into the race details after that.
I think, Mark, why don't you talk about like how you structured my training? And then I can talk about the emotional side of it.
Yeah, so like with any training program, we definitely kind of map out some of those key races throughout the year and kind of what the targets are for those. And I think when we looked at the year, like Ironman Canada was definitely probably the like A+ race of the year. Jess has been like having a fantastic year, like within our training group, especially. We've been able to cultivate like a really good group, like myself, Jess, and one of her fellow training partners, Allison, have really like we've been able to push each other as like a small group a bunch this year to really get better. So we had Ironman Canada kind of on the schedule there, and then early in the year we knocked off like a key block of like running races, and Jess made some like huge gains in running this year just from like chasing myself and Allison a bunch. Like took 5 minutes off her half marathon PB and ran like 1:19, which was like huge when she had run 1:24 the year before. So like we got the ball rolling early, and like a lot of that early time of the year is run focused, and doubling down on that. And then we really got into the like tri fitness after that. So a couple key races along the way, we did American Triple T, which is a crazy one where you race 4 times over 3 days, and it's just this awesome like volume building like camp for a weekend, which kind of spiraled into Muscleman, which is kind of her first like call it A race of the year, which was a 70.3 half Ironman distance, and that was her first age group win that she got at like an Ironman race. I think she won Guelph Lake overall on the way there too. So like in terms of the like structure of the training, we just kept building to peak at those certain races. And then we left enough time for like a very specific Ironman block that was about 8 weeks after that 70.3 kind of specific block. And yeah, that was just really focused on consistency and building volume over, especially those 8 weeks. Like it was a very focused on Ironman. We didn't really race at all during that time. And I think it really paid off when she got to race day of having like an amazing base of a good solid 8 weeks in there. And maybe I'll shoot it over to Jess to let her kind of talk about more along the lines of some of her training highlights or tough days that probably like helped her kind of prep for that Ironman Canada day.
Yeah, one of the things that, and I'm not just saying this because he's my husband, but the way that I love that Mark coaches it is different than any other triathlon coach I've ever worked with, and I have worked with a few others, is that, you know, in triathlon, I know it seems insane that we train like 15 to 20 hours a week, but you know, a lot of high level triathletes train upwards to like 30 hours in their peak, and they do a lot of like long, slow distance. Their blocks are very long. So for a lot of triathletes, when they hear that we only train 15 to 20 hours, it's not a holy smokes, that's a lot. And then the fact that I did an 8-week training block, don't get me wrong. Like I was recently training with someone and they're like, wow, I just thought that you were like excited about all training all the time, because I was like very reluctant to go on a swim. And I was like, no, like for me, it was just, you know, when you have a coach that you trust and you check boxes, it's just showing up every single day, committing to the work and getting it done. But I get bored if the training cycle, I have to say Ironman training is grueling. The race was so much easier than like the training leading up to it. That was the hard part. So the fact that he was able to get me ready, and I have to say, this was the first time I felt ready for an Ironman, like physically and like psychologically, I felt ready, and that almost never happens. Like he was able to get me there. But I think like when I look back on sort of the highs and the lows, we'll start with the positive because that's always a good thing to do. Like some of my best days, there was a day where the night before I ate like a ton of sushi, and then the next day I went on a ride, and in a headwind was just like, there was a bunch of guys in the group, and I was like riding at just Ironman watts, which is how you measure power on the bike. And I was like very self-conscious. I was like, oh, like pass me if you need to. And they're like, we're almost falling off the back. And that was a moment for Mark where he's like, oh my gosh, like if she can just hold Ironman watts and do this, she might be able to do damage. And that was like a 180K ride. And then the day after that, actually one of the following weeks, there was a really low point. So it just shows that you can have a really high. And then the next weekend, I think I had a 200K ride, and I made a fueling error and I was vomiting on my bike by 100K, and I still had 100K to go. And it was a moment where Mark said to me, he's like, don't turn this into a sufferfest. Like you can turn around. Like, and I was like, no, you can't quit in an Ironman. So it was like 34 degrees and I was like vomiting and just suffering. And like I biked out. It was when I had like 50K left. I just like hung over my bike and I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I just did it. And then the day after that though, I had a 32-kilometer long run and I crushed it. So I'm like, I can rebound doing that. But then the following week I had one where I was feeling so dizzy that I needed to like have a fetal position and curl up on the side of the road to reset. So it just shows like training is a journey. And the reality is the way that Mark and I sort of measure is that, you know, a third of your days, you sort of bucket your training days into 3 different types. And he'll use as a term of measurement. He'll be like, was that a 1 day, a 2 day, or a 3 day? So if I have a 3 day, that would be like my Ironman day. Like best day, everything is clicking. It's the day of your life. A 2 day is like, you know, it's just a day. You're checking boxes. You're not feeling spectacular. You're not feeling bad. And then your 1 is just, it's a crummy day. It's a day where you're throwing up on your bike. So, and it's okay. And it's actually important to have days in each one of those buckets. It's just, you can't have too many days in any one of the buckets. So that's a little bit about the training is just, you know, there was, even though there were spectacular highs and spectacular lows, it really wasn't about, anything extreme. It was just following the plan, checking the boxes, trying to get all those training days in.
No, that's awesome. I love the 1, 2, 3 day thing. That's awesome. And I mean, yeah, I think some of yeah, that's puking on a 200K ride. I mean, I would be getting an Uber for sure. I have to ask though, because it sounds like what Mark was saying too with the races. It sounds like the races you were really dialed in. Is like, Mark, is there any sort of strategic way of trying to make sure that the race days are threes versus, you might have a bad day, or you might have just an okay day, but it sounds like Jess has really hit like every race at like a high level this year.
Yeah,
by
of course.
design, I'm assuming?
That's development as an athlete as well as, I think when people talk about Jess, they would not call her robotic at all. But the true sign of an athlete, especially as they continue to develop, is on a race day, they are super predictive and almost robotic when it comes down to it. Like, you obviously can't leave emotions out of it. You need to have that at key moments in the race to make sure you dig deep and you get the most out of yourself. But in a day like an Ironman, she's literally almost going robotic for 9 hours and then pushing for that final hour. So when we talk about those 1, 2, and 3 days, especially in training, this is where you look at those 1 days that really suck, and you don't let them destroy you or get you down, or they're not this snapshot of your current fitness. You're just having a bad day. And that's my role as a coach, is to program the training. Because I want, though, if the training is appropriate, I think it's good to have training in all three of those buckets, because you're getting enough stimulus of days that you're feeling good, days you're feeling crap, and balancing all that out to make a good training plan. And then it's once you learn from those 1 days that those don't, you can still come back from those days. They're days that are tough, but if you learn from them and how to improve, and then you have those 2 days you check off, and then those 3 days that are obviously days you get really fired up and pump you up, and you're like, oh man, here's what I could do on an amazing day. You start to learn that on 1, 2, or 3 days, they're really not all that different in terms of a performance when you come down to a race day. And then obviously when you go into a taper, like an Ironman, we do call it a 2-week taper, where we cut down training volume and intensity a bit. Your likelihood of landing more on a 2 or 3 day when that race day comes about is exponentially higher than having a 1 day. But that also, I'm sure Jess can say more, and I can talk to it as an athlete as well, more in my early days, I had a lot more 1 days on the race course, where my 1, 2, and 3 days are all very similar on a race course now, within minutes. And it was cool when we put in her goal times on Training Peaks ahead of time. She literally nailed them to a T, within a 10-hour day. And people say so many things can go wrong in an Ironman, but she showed how, if your coach is dialed in, knows what you're capable of, the athlete believes in it and knows how to execute, that you can actually be very predictable on a day like that. And while predictability doesn't sound sexy necessarily, it clearly yields some damn good results when you look at it. So yeah, that's the recipe you got to put together.
I mean, I was going to say that I think it is impressive about endurance sports and how predictable, how you can actually predict something where it seems like it's such a long period of time, where so many things could go wrong because there's so many things that are out of your control. But for a sport, it does feel pretty predictable, which is, kudos to the amazing coaches like you and other people that are sort of, in the sport. But yes, let's dive into the race. Let's hear about it. I want, maybe Jess, Mark, feel free to jump in when you want, but break down the swim, the bike, the run, how things were going, just give us highlights, lowlights, anything you think is important. Sure. I want to hear it. I want to be in Mark's shoes.
Okay. Well, what's cool about this race, I have to say, I've been on Ironman start lines where I just wanted to throw up. I was just feeling so uncomfortable, so nervous, so you almost get this nervous energy because you're so, how much the day is going to hurt, how hard it's going to be. But I had such intense training and such realistic Ironman training days leading in. I felt so prepared that I didn't have negative anxious energy, if that makes sense. So leading into the day, I was talking to some of my training partners and they're saying like even a couple weeks out, I started narrowing my focus. I was talking a little less in workouts. I was almost getting in that race headspace as I was entering into those weeks. So race morning, I was just so focused. It wasn't even a nervous energy. And like Mark said, I am anything but robotic, but race morning, absolutely robotic. I just went through every single motion. I knew what I was supposed to do, whereas I was supposed to be when, and just started from the moment that I woke up, controlling everything I could control, staying super calm and sort of in this moment of like super grateful to just be there. And it's weird. I knew it was going to be a great day before it even started, and I don't even know how to explain it. It was just the headspace was so spot on. I was exactly where I needed to be. So as I was entering, sorry, go ahead.
Were you like, did you do things to like work on that? Like, was it like you purposely did different things, or you just like, you just woke up and you felt good and you just kind of continued the momentum?
I think as like talking about, referencing what Mark said earlier, but just being an athlete a really long time, I think that you build out these habits that you don't even realize are preparing you, but you just do them automatically. I was saying to him that I kind of got chills after the race because I had this like very weird, like anytime I was on like a very boring run, where it was just me and my own thoughts, I just had this like little visualization that I would go to pass the time. And it was just like of me, like winning a marathon. And it had no like, and I wasn't even comparing it to the Ironman, and then we'll get to the run, but like, I kind of got like, holy smokes, chills when it was over. Cause I'm like, I visualized all of this. Like I visualized the screaming and I didn't even know what I was doing. So I was kind of like, got into that, like, I don't know, like champion mindset. Like, yeah. And I think that that's the best way to describe it. I was in flow state for like 10 hours and I was just, I had practiced it. I was ready. I was just so locked in when I stepped in the water. And it was just, I always said it was like a celebration of all the hard work that I had done. I didn't put a ton of pressure. I knew what I needed to do and I was just doing it. So I didn't let any snags get in the way. So the water was, swim is my weakest sport. I was planning on maybe swimming at best a 108. I'd been at the pool about 3 days a week. And then, just hoping for the best. And then I was going to scrap my way to the top, which is normally like I'm chasing all day. I'm not normally first out of the water by any means. But the water was super calm. Like the temperature of the day was perfect. Like everything was perfect. It's one of those days where Marco said to me at the beginning, he's like, the only thing that can happen that is going to mess you up is you getting in your own way. So the whole day I'm like, just stay out of your own way. So I tried to sight perfectly on the swim, tried to keep out of people's way, tried to find feet. So in swim, you can draft behind people and it actually makes like a 20% like less effort. So tried to save my energy. And I've got to say, coming under the water, I almost choked because I looked down at my watch and it was like a 104 and I couldn't even dream of swimming that fast. Like the exponential jump. I don't think even Mark was expecting that of me. So it was that day. It was in that moment where I'm like, this is the race of my life. Like I am flying today because normally that's the sport that holds me back. And I was already leaving in a really good position. So that was a big moment for me.
So in that situation, is there time to like celebrate and holy shit, I just like PR'd my swim. I'm in such a good position. Do you let your mind trail off like that? Or you are like, no shit, I'm not done. Like this, there's more work to do. Like, cause you could basically say like, oh, today was already a success. I crushed my swim. Right. And if I finish where I finish, at least I'll look back and I had a great swim.
Here's the thing about triathlon is you can't separate out the sports. You can have a darn good swim and a darn good run and a really terrible triathlon. So people are like, oh yeah, I was on track for X, but you didn't finish. It's like saying that you're on track for something of a time for a marathon and crumbling at 32 kilometers. The race starts at 32 kilometers. It's how you put it all together. So Yes, I had a moment of like,
Okay.
and you can see it in my race photos. I got a big old smile on my face when I come out of the water. But instead of using that as motivation to stop, I'm just like, let it feed me of being like, yep, like check. Now let's do the next thing. And then the transition is the next thing. You got to keep it smooth. And, you know, you've got to really slow down. So often in transition, especially when I was new, I would just be almost frantic with it. And when you're frantic with it, you drop things or you forget things. So I almost, what felt like taking it too slow, I had my like fastest transition because it was, you know, making sure you're placing things, you're getting the right helmet, you're getting your bike, you're getting like all the things. So you're fully prepared by the time you get out on the bike course. So that was great. I got on the bike.
Yeah, so I was definitely very fired up after that swim. I was doing a run. I ran out like the first 10K of the. Oh,
Feel free to keep going if I get kicked out.
so I was definitely fired up from her swim. I had done a run out like the first 10K of the bike course, and then I was turning back around, and I had my phone with me. So like when I saw her swim, and I saw Bronwyn leading out of the water, and the rest of the crew all had like awesome swims, I was just like jumping up and down, and my pace on the run was going way faster than I should have been going because I was just so fired up. And she was at that point, I think, sixth in her age group and like 25th female overall, which usually she's like way further down in the standings at that point. So I was like, oh man, like this is a good spot to start. And like, I think, yeah, it just catapulted the rest of the day. And as we kind of jump along, I can keep giving my thoughts of kind of what I thought was the potential of the day. But like even ahead of the race, like I knew she was on track for something special. I'd done some recon and not told her about it, about like who was in her age group and like who her main competitors are going to be and where they were in the race. And like, I know there's not many people that could run with Jess. So like, I knew she was already in a great spot, like after that swim, just knowing like what I knew before the race. So yeah, like what a good setup for the day. And she just catapulted it off of that.
So she was around like 25th coming out of the swim?
Yeah,
yes?
correct. 25th female overall, and then she was like sixth in her age group at that point, where usually she's like 20th or 30th or something in her age group at that point, or like 150th female overall. Like this was a huge spot to be after the swim.
And so, I mean, 25th to first, that seems like a massive climb. You were saying before that you're usually used to chasing. I mean, assuming you're even further down that, like, is that quite common to jump that many spots with that many different sports just because?
Yeah, in a long Ironman like that, like you can definitely jump a lot. Like it's a crazy long day, and you can lose it in the swim, but you definitely like can't win it there. Like even in transition, like she jumped 10 spots in transition. Like she downplayed it as if she just like cruised through transition and took her time. But like I always say to the people in our club, we're not going to be the people that lose time in transition. Like this is something that you don't need to forge any extra fitness to get extra speed out of. Like just take the time, learn how to do it quickly and efficiently and do it smooth, and you're going to gain time on people. Like she jumped from 26th to 16th overall just in transition, and that's a 2-minute transition. Like wow. People are taking 4, 5, 6 minutes in there. Like you advanced yourself 10 positions that took no extra fitness. Like yeah, you can jump pretty quickly in it. And like by 23K on the bike, she's like 4th overall and 3rd in her age group. Bronwyn was leading the race at that point. Like, yeah, I was pumped up when our ladies are 1st and 4th overall, and I know they're the strongest 2 bikers. It's a pretty cool moment.
No, that's great. Yeah, because we had Bronwyn on the podcast too, and I know that she's got a great swimmer, so it's awesome that the whole crew is there. So yeah, so you transition and you're jumping the bike. And is biking your strength, would you say?
No, I'd say running is my top strength. Okay. Biking is my second. And Mark and I have worked really hard in the past. Like, we've adjusted our like strategy a little bit with me this year. Is that in the past because I knew I was a good runner and that was it. I was almost protecting all day to make sure that I could like let go on the run. But then I would find that I would have like really terrible bikes compared to the rest of the field. And I'm like, I know I'm better than this. So this year in particular, Mark was like, Jess, we're going to try something new. I don't care how bad your run is. You are going to bike your brains out. And which is normally terrible advice for a triathlete. You want to save your legs. So don't try this at home if you're new to triathlon. But he's like, you've earned the right to be able to just go bananas on the bike. So, and that's on, quite frankly, that I won the race the next weekend after he said that I tested out at Guelph Lake. And I was like, oh, and then I won my age group and then I won this race. So I think we found a pretty good strategy. And I don't even think that I'm that much better of a biker than I was before. I just have been actually like letting myself push a little harder. So I would say bike is my second, but like Mark said, in like the first 23 kilometers though, like, and so on the bike, I'm not just pedaling however I feel. You have like a power meter that gives you a number, and he sort of gave me the numbers that I should be pedaling at to sustain over the 5-ish hours that I'm out there. So I was just following my numbers, just focusing on, I have it to beep every, 15 minutes. So I would be, eating, drinking. A strategy I took this race was I did a lot more liquid nutrition. So in the past I'd have a little bit of solid and liquid, but this one I used Morton. So in the past I've had gut issues. I've actually like vomited on the bike in a race because my gut flipped. This race, I, tried Morton. I did 300 gram bottle of carbohydrate bottles. So that's like a lot of grams of carbohydrates. And then I had about 100 grams of candies. So lots of sugar.
Sorry, what's Morton?
Morton is like Mark, maybe you can explain it better than I can. What's Morton, Mark?
Yeah, it's just like a high carb, like hydrogel type of powder that you put in the drink, and it's got like,
What is it? Sugar, dextrose?
I think it's maltodextrin and I want to say, I forget what the exact combo is, but it's like the dual transport one because you need like the dual transport to like be able to take on
100 grams
an hour. So yeah.
No, I was aiming for about 70 grams of carbohydrates an hour, which is like you want to, and the strategy on the bike is you want to get as many grams in as you can because you take in a little less at the run. So really you're fueling your run when you're on the bike.
And you've struggled in the past to take down the fuel on the bike, like just because your stomach or?
No, I've taken it down. It's just caused stomach troubles on the run, which slowed me down. Like I felt like I never ran an Ironman to my potential before because, to be like frank, it was porta potty stops, and that's all within your times when you are looking at the overall run. And I wanted to avoid that.
Yeah. I always wonder about that, the amount of like carbs. I know you guys burn a lot of carbs, but it's just like the amount of gels and candies and stuff that you have to digest is just like, oh my God.
But your gut can be trained in the same way that your muscles can. So
I was just going to say, like, it probably takes a few races to get to because I imagine if I went out there, my stomach would just be yelling at me. But yes, after 10, 15 times, I'm sure you adapt.
Yeah. And you train it in training. Like you use your fueling strategy on long training days as well. So you've had like dozens and dozens of days that you've practiced it, and then you tweak. And I learned, you don't drink a whole thing of Coke in the middle of a bike ride very quickly. That's a terrible idea.
So what's the go-to candy? We got Fuzzy Peaches, we got Sour Patch. Like, what's the go-to candy?
So mine is something called Fruitfuls. They're almost like my training partners call them slugs. They go down really easy, and 4 of them is 33 grams of carbohydrates. So they're brilliant.
Okay. Mark, do you have a favorite?
I'm a Fuzzy Peaches guy for sure. They're the best. Yeah, I love them.
Do you see anybody like hanging like liquor shit out of their mouth? Or
no, I haven't seen that yet, but I wouldn't be opposed to trying it. That's for sure.
Like I said, we'll try anything.
Fruit by the foot, just have this like lang dangly thing just chewing on.
Love it.
God.
Anyways, more serious talk. The bike, yes. So how did the bike go? Like I'm just like, it was a fast track, or I know you guys talk about sometimes the track can be difficult. Was the conditions pretty good?
Conditions were perfect. So it's the first like 65K are downhill. or very, very fast. So my problem is, and this is where I thought I was going to have a wrinkle of the day, is that I have actually like a bulging disc in my back, which gives me like a bit of sciatic pain, depending, and especially when I ride aero a long time. Because spoiler alert, triathlon isn't great for your back when you look at, being hunched over on your bike for that long. So at around 65K, I just started feeling like garbage, like cramped up, which is why hilly courses are really great for me, because right around 65K, there's like about a 7-kilometer climb up in the mountains. And that actually helped reset. It's a different position. It's the bike courses where I need to be hunched over for like the full 5 and a bit hours that really just destroy me. So I was really happy I could reset there. And I would say for most of the bike ride, I was able to hold my watts. Like normally you trail down a little bit. There was one moment where I struggled a little bit right after the second climb at about 110 kilometers, where there was a headwind and I felt kind of like garbage. And I let my wattage slip like a little bit for maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6K. But it was right in that overpass in the mountain where someone yelled out, they started yelling out my placing. They're like, "You're the 3rd female we see." And then I was like, what? Like, I'm top 3 in this race. Like, and that was the first moment that I'm like, wow, like I might do well. And then all of a sudden it changed to like, you're 2nd in the race. And I knew, I hadn't seen Bronwyn, who is like, you'd mentioned it earlier, like she's an absolute mermaid. She went to Olympic trials. Like she's like the best swimmer I've ever met. And she, like very, like Mark said, like her and I would hope do the strongest bike legs of the day. I'm like, she's the only one that would be in front of me. So I'm like, this is crazy. Like LP girls are dominating this race. Like Mark must be losing his mind right now.
And confirm I was.
So like so the biggest thing, I mean, because I don't do endurance, and I'm sure people that do endurance, like they probably just like, oh my God, roll your eyes at me when I ask these questions. But like, what are you like? There's so much time, especially on the bike. Like, what do you think? Like, are you dialed in all the time? I know you said you had the beeper thing, you had to do your fueling. Like, honestly, give me like, how much time are you sitting there just thinking about things like, what do I have to pick up the grocery store after this, or what do I have to do? Like, do you allow your mind to wander outside of the race, or like, is it like purely just so much focused state on like you and the bike and everything else? Because that can be exhausting too.
It's true. In training, I'm maybe a little less focused, but I have to say in a race, no, I am fully dialed in that full time. I'm thinking about, because it's in those moments, if you start letting your mind shift, that's when your cadence goes off. That's where your positioning goes off. Like it's a full-time job to monitor, like, is my head in the right position so I'm getting the most aero? Am I eating? Am I pedaling properly? Am I going through aid stations smoothly? Like, you're always being, how can I optimize what I'm doing right now to go as fast as I can and not slip? And because I was able to stay in that state the entire time, I think that's why I had the bike I did, is that you can't let it slip. So I guess. Right.
And then you find out you're in 3rd. So you're just like, okay, I need to hunt down the next person, then the next person. And that's your race, basically.
Actually, yes and no. The most important thing that you can do when you're doing an Ironman is be patient. And that's the cool thing about having an awesome coach, is that I know what I'm supposed to do. It actually doesn't matter where 1st and 2nd are. What matters is that I follow my wattage numbers and I execute on my plan, because the reality is, if I do that, I'm not going to burn the matches, so that once I get to the run, they're in trouble. I'm going to hunt them down. So like, I'm not hunting on the bike. I'm just executing my plan. What they do is up to them.
Such a good athlete.
Yeah. Well, but that's
maturity.
But that's how you lose races, is when you start getting emotional. Right. I check my emotions at the door when I race. Like I said, I'm like, I can be emotional, but not when I'm racing. I'm a robot.
And so I always hear about like, there's certain almost very specific times in races that like everyone talks about, like where there's a marathon, it's like, okay, like beware of the 35K that gets rocky there. Like everyone's always talks about like there's certain times in races where it's just like, it's a down point. Do you have those? And were they different on this one? Like you said, 65K, your back was sort of sore. Is that normal for you around 65K? Or is it really dependent on the
It's
course.
dependent on the course. That one was way too early for me to feel that.
Okay.
But I didn't give it much negative energy. I'm like, cool. Well, you've already had a really great day. So just manage it. Keep like your only job. It goes back to that whole comment of like, I might not be the best at a lot of things, but I can suffer probably more than most. So I'm like, I don't care how much it hurts. I'm going to hold my power. And that's your job today, even if it hurts. So, because I also know once I get onto the run, I can reset. So I'm like, this could be 4.5 hours of agony, but you're going to just suck it up and go. But thankfully I didn't need to do that. So then it was like, I just was able to just fully enjoy the bike ride and just was like grateful that it didn't get worse.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's cool. And so, where did you end up at the end of the bike then?
So by the end of the bike, I finished in second place. So, second overall. And I knew so Bronwyn was about 5 minutes in front of me. But she saw me and I was like, shoot, because now like she knows where I am. So, she put on the pressure a little bit. So I think she was like Mark, like 6.5 minutes ahead of me by the time that I got on the run. So then I did another really fast transition, and actually maybe we'll stop because we did say that Mark would be able to give his thoughts on my bike.
Yeah, I don't have too much more to note on that. Like it was for the tracking, there was no tracking from like 106 to 180K. So like I knew Jess was in, I think, second or third at that final tracking. So like that's where when we realized there was no tracking for like another 2 hours, it was like, just hold your breath and pray they both have good, like they were both riding well. So like I felt like they were both going to ride well to the end. And as long as they had good mechanical luck and no flats or bikes falling apart, that they were going to be in good shape. But when the tracker goes black for 2 hours and you can't watch, and your two ladies are like first and second or first and third in the race, like you're just holding your breath and waiting for them to get off the bike. And I was just waiting at the end of that run course.
What did you do to pass the time? Were you like pacing back and forth, like driving yourself crazy?
Yeah, I might have indulged in a couple beverages to calm.
Easy.
They were going down way too smooth with how excited I was. I just wanted to get them on the run and be able to cheer them in person versus just waiting.
And at that point, like they're I said they're at the top of the race. At that point, is that when you're like, yeah, this is like, because like just saying, like her running is her strength. So you already knew that this was going to not be a walk in the park by any means, but like you knew that she was in contention to really crush the day.
Yeah, totally. Especially once I finally got the splits that both of them were off the bike, Bronwyn and Jess, I was like, oh man, this is going to be like a really good day. Cause I know they both can like run super well. Like that's Jess's strengths. Bronwyn has worked on hers a lot this year and didn't quite get the run she deserved on that day. But she'll be back at it. She's hungry. But yeah, I knew it was going to be like a pretty special day at that point, just because they also had like another 5 to 10 minutes on like the people behind them. So I really just wanted to see how they came around that first corner on the run and how they were both looking. And when I saw they both were looking like great as they came around that first corner, I knew it was definitely going to be a pretty good one. So you obviously got to hold it together for a whole marathon, so you can't get too ahead of yourself. But I know Jess is what she's done in Ironman marathons before. Like I think the worst she's run is like 3:31, which is like typically a top couple female run split. And I know she had improved on the run and she felt good and was riding the momentum of an amazing day. Like I was like, oh man, I think she's primed for a really good one here.
Yeah. So just like at the end of the bike, how were you feeling at that point? Like, were you feeling fairly fresh? Like any different than any other sort of race? You're just feeling, you're trying to go in transition, but
yeah, I was like, I had 2 very disappointing Ironmans last year, and where I just felt terrible coming off the bike, and they both, for their own reasons, were sort of like demoralizing moments. So like, I think it's important. Like, not every race is a mountaintop moment, and I definitely have had my share that weren't. Mm-hmm. So coming off the bike, there's like the last 20K into the transition are almost downhill. So I was flying like 50, 60 kilometers an hour down a hill. And then into town is a bit of a false flat. But I was like, I am flying because I was passing guys consistently. no one was passing me. So I'm like, I must be feeling much better than the people around me. And this is the bike. So I got on the run and it felt like I hadn't swam or biked. Like I just felt so fresh and like so good. And then it was like in the first 500 meters, I saw Mark, and like just seeing him was such a boost. And then in the first kilometer, there's like a huge hill, and like Mark had like worked on the strategy a lot with me before that. If he's like, if you are running faster than 6 minutes per kilometer up that hill, you're going too fast. Like you're going to burn yourself out. So just like, again, it goes back to executing on the plan. And then the first 10K is like this really, it's a slow gravel section. And it's sort of like a gravel trail with a slight incline for the first 5K. And then you get a decline on the way back. So just like, because you feel good, right? Because you're like, oh, thank goodness I'm running. Just holding yourself back, not running too hard, because like there's so many places where you're not going to win the race, but you could lose the race. So just being patient. At that point, like it was exciting to hear, like the people were yelling like how much time I kept. You're like, you're 4 minutes behind, you're 3 minutes behind. Like, and I started hearing that. So probably at about, it was the turnaround at 5K where Bronwyn was coming towards me and I was running out, and like, we're teammates, right? So we always joke with LP, especially the ladies, that it's like, I if anyone's going to beat me, I want it to be you, sort of thing. Like we really are like super supportive, which I think is what is the specialness of this community. So often in competitive sports, you can sort of beat up over each other to try and get the win. And I think we have such an incredible, respectful community and such like a mutual respect for all each other. So like we had nothing but pure happiness for each other, and which is awesome. And it was a boost to be able to see her. And then probably about a kilometer later at the aid station, I passed her, we gave a high five, and then I swapped out for the lead cyclist, which I found out after the race is Jen Annette, who's like a Canadian professional triathlete. Like I had no idea while she was behind me. But I ended up getting like the world's best cyclist because she has had the lead cyclist before. So she knew exactly what she would need to do for me. And then like, holy smokes, that's when like the best part of my day started, as like being in front. It's almost like when you win, you keep winning, because like coming around the corner after this huge downhill at about 10K, you need to snake through the city. And I was just so unprepared for people to be lined like 8 deep. And it was like a sound tunnel of people just screaming. And I realized like, oh my God, they're screaming that I'm first. Like, what a moment. Like I actually kind of got a lump in my throat, and like tears were pricking my eyes because I was so like unprepared for the crowd support. And then the lead cyclist had like a megaphone and a siren, and was like a sign that said lead female. So all along the course, she'd be like, all right, everyone, and like just like hype up the crowd. So I'm like, how can you not, even when you feel bad, I have my own personal hype woman with me for the rest of this race. And she was like clearing way for me. Like, I'm like, wow, like that's where I said, if you start winning, you keep winning, because they make it that way. And I was just like, I kept looking down and I'm like, okay, like Mark might kill me because I'm going much faster than we had talked about. But I also was riding the like ride of the
it's adrenaline at that point, right?
And excitement. And also I was just feeling so good. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to see how it, like, I wasn't stupid about it. Like I ran within my range of what was reasonable. I wasn't running like my actual marathon pace, but I was probably running about 10 to 20 seconds faster per kilometer, depending on which one, kilometer. But I heard you asked earlier about like times that you need to feel good versus bad. I have this, a wise person who's been in the sport a long time once said, like, you should feel good in an Ironman up until the half marathon point. If you feel bad before then, you've gone too hard. So I'm like, interesting. So I weirdly like hung on to that. So I was just like flying through the first half marathon. I saw Mark at around the half marathon, and like we just kind of were like, oh my god, like
Is this happening?
And then that's kind of like where you head into the second part, which is like that's where the full day out there adds up. And then all of those, if you've made some emotional decisions, if you started chasing people, you did anything stupid, that's when it shows up, because you can kind of fake a first half, but the second half is where it gets real. Sorry,
Oh, good.
So in the second half, just kept focusing on my nutrition strategy. And then, it did start hurting, but I didn't fade that much. Like the crowd support was ridiculous. And then also I do attribute it to the fact that for past Ironmans, I wasn't able, just because of COVID, to do strength all the way through consistently. Pausing so you can cut that out. I wasn't able to do strength consistently, but because I did it this time, I didn't have the same breakdown. So I don't know, like Mark, what were you thinking over this time?
Yeah, I was obviously going crazy, and I think the beer count might have been at about 8 at that point, because they were just. Now I knew things were really going, and she was flying, so I was way too excited. But yeah, just like the base you had created that year of like run speed, plus the strength, plus the nutrition, like it was just. I knew we had finally mastered the recipe in that moment, which was so cool to like, and like that same recipe could not work on another day. Like you were just having that perfect day. So like, it was just so cool to see like you get the day you deserve, and like that I've thought you've had in you for like many years before this. So it was definitely a sigh moment for me of like, oh my goodness, it's finally here. And there wasn't much sighing. It was mostly loud cheering and jumping up and down and high-fiving. And man, she had the best crowd support of like anybody, even the like lead guys that were going by. People were going 10 times crazier for her. It was like a crazy atmosphere I've never seen before in triathlon. It was wild.
I have to ask, like, do you guys talk about motivation? Like, I know that some people, they want their significant other or their crew to be at, 35K exactly, or like there's certain points in the race where you know that you're at a lull and you need some sort of motivation. Like, do you look for that motivation, Jess? Obviously, in this case, like you're getting it without asking for it. I mean, you deserve it because you're first place, but it seems like motivation really carried you a lot at the end. Normally on a race, would you be seeking that motivation? Do you have sort of specific places of motivation?
I think no. I mean, it's amazing to have the crowd support, and that was such a bonus. And that's where I say, if you win, you keep winning. But I point back to that 200-kilometer bike ride where Mark's like, you can quit. And I'm like, no, like you can't quit. And so I think that's inside me when I'm racing, is like, it's assuming that it could be a bad day. That the motivation needs to come from inside. If I need external motivation, then I'm going to crumble at 35K regardless, because Mark might not be there. You need to be super hungry for it yourself. So I could be my own hype woman when I have to be.
Okay.
I think that's something that's cool. Like learned over time too, is like, I could say in the early part of my career, like I and Jess would have been the same. We are looking for that external stuff. And like, you think about when you're a newer runner, like you're almost finding ways to like disconnect from the workouts by like wearing things like headphones. Like a lot of newer runners wear headphones, where you look like elite runners and stronger runners like are wearing headphones. They don't want to be disconnected from the moment. They want to be in the moment for all of it, and they have control of it themselves. So they've built this like these different mental tools to be able to dig inside themselves deep when it comes down to crunch time. And everybody has different tactics. Like personally, I use stuff of like pretending people are like talking like crap about me. They're like, oh, this guy's like not a very good biker or not a very good runner. Like, and that gets me fired up, where like someone like Jess would look for different internal motivation. But I think, if you're looking for that external stuff, like, and it's not there for you, then it's like a crutch for you to give up or find a way to drop out. And I think you hold yourself a lot more accountable when you build your internal tools mentally to dig deep in those moments, and don't need anybody to hold your hand through the finish line. So go get it yourself.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of my questions are coming from today, I think too, because like I've always thought endurance sport, um, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but it's got to be 50-50 mental versus physical. Like I know that you put your body through a lot, but like because of the amount of time and going back to what you were saying before, Jess, and how focused and dialed you are in for that amount of time versus letting your mind drift, it's a lot of mental strain and volume of just staying in the moment. And it's super impressive on how mentally strong you are. That's clearly one of your superpowers against some of the other people in the field, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked a long time at it. I used to, when Mark and I first started dating, I definitely was a very different person. I remember a moment where he signed me up for a race and I was so nervous about it. I was like weeping in my hot yoga class the day before. Like I was so nervous. I just like the idea of pressure. And now like I'm a completely different beast where I'm just like, bring that pressure. I want it. Make it hard. Like I don't care. And I think it's like years and years and years of building up that confidence that I don't care what the day throws me. I'm going to be okay because I have enough tools that I can problem solve, and I've worked on the fitness, and it's just, I think it just comes down to confidence. And that doesn't happen overnight.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, going to mindset, I guess. So the end of the race, I assume is, I guess, the hardest part of the race. I mean, you know, when you're so close, but yet you're, you know, so far, I guess. Like, how did the last few K go for you?
Painful. Like, I know my speed looked okay, but I was making like birthing noises in the last 3K. I just needed a finish line and just like gutting it out. You go to a different like place in your mind in order to just get there, because your body does start screaming. I don't want to paint any sort of picture that I just sort of like magically floated through the marathon. Like it got ugly at the end. It hurt so bad. But I did have moments in that race where I'm like, you know what, this might be the only time in your life that you're going to win an Ironman. So I don't care how much it hurts. Just make sure you're present enough to just soak it all in. So like making sure, like I took the time to like high five kids who were on the side. And like, even though I wasn't smiling anymore, I was kind of grimacing, but like it was, you know, doing everything I could to get to that finish line. So yeah, it hurt. I needed to dig deep, but I didn't need that internal motivation sometimes in the same way as if I'm out there alone. Like the crowd was just going wild, especially because they knew I was so close. So they kind of carried me in. And then also knowing like, I don't know, like it's so cool to have your husband coach you. So then you have the double whammy of like, you always want to make your coach proud, but when it's your life partner too, like just wanting to make him proud with my time and knowing he was like, I don't know. I couldn't wait to get to the finish line to look at him and be like, oh my God, look what we did. So, yeah, it was a gritty last 5K, but it was also like, I still remember every single one of them and like they cherish them. And breaking the tape was the coolest thing, like the announcement and being able to be on that carpet. And like, I broke the tape earlier. Mark is holding it. I broke the tape earlier this year in a race, and I just like, I'm such a newbie at winning races that I like just ran through it. And I'm actually really glad I had that moment of Mark teasing me and being like, wow, we need to work on this. Like you need to hold it over your head. Cause I like almost did a show of it, but the pictures we got were unbelievable. So like, we're definitely framing some of those.
Yeah, there's some cool shots. I mean, that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, I have to ask, because you mentioned a few times, like, I think you guys are quite the dynamic duo, right? Like, both elite athletes, partners in life, coach, athlete. Like, I would love to dive into like, how do you like? It sounds like you're a great team. How do you manage this? Like, did it start as a shared passion? Is it become a shared? Obviously, it's a huge part of your life now, but like, how do you guys go at it without, you know, killing each other or go at it with, you know, I mean, like oftentimes it's, you know, you spend a lot of time with your partner. So it's like, I know you guys are spending a lot of time with your partner in difficult circumstances.
I think I can kick this one off, and I can let Jess jump in after to fill in the void or
Okay.
scold me on anything that maybe we're not yet aligned on.
This is the fun part of the podcast.
Exactly. But like for those that don't know our story, like we met when we were like 25-ish, and like it was through, we met at like a running race. So like we already kind of had that shared passion for endurance, which is I think why we hit it off so much, is like we realized, oh wait, I can go on like 6-hour bike rides or 30K runs on the weekend and not get like, not have my partner like sad about it. My partner's pumped and we're hanging out and we're having like, to this day, Jess and I still have probably some of our like best bonding time or best like conversations about life, work, training, like on these runs or rides that we're on. So yeah, like shared passion, that part of it is definitely easy. Like when in our early part of triathlon, like I've only been coaching her now for, I think it's just over 3 years. So we both had different coaches at the time, and I really wanted her to, when I started coaching her, to actually like come to me at that point and be like, hey, I want you to coach me, because I wanted to like make sure that I had proven myself first. Like she's always been a like high caliber athlete, like in the endurance world since I've worked with her. So I like felt like I needed to kind of earn that spot, and I wanted her to fully trust in it too. So like, and even in the early parts of our like career, both training together as well as coaching together, like we butted heads a little bit more. Like we hadn't got down our communication pieces around like training and like everything. All of our conversations like were very blended, and that like if I was trying to talk to her something about training, like it was being misconstrued as like an attack on the relationship, where like I was really like just having my coach hat on. And like that's really evolved over the last number of years, where she knows like, sure, there's going to be some moments, and it's often where we're just tired or hungry where we're at each other. Like for the most part, we're very like civil and don't fight very much and can put our differences aside pretty quickly. So like, yeah, she can tell like when I'm putting up the mirror to her or holding her accountable for something around like training. It's not an attack on a relationship, and it doesn't change how much I love her as like a wife. It's just me trying to get the most out of her as an athlete. So I think it's that part is had to develop as she has as an athlete. Like it takes time with anything and takes a couple speed bumps along the way. But yeah, it's we love doing it together, and it's some of our favorite times. So like I think we're good at realizing that in the moment and realizing these could be like our glory days and that we're living it right now. So we're living it to the fullest and having fun with it. So maybe Jess has more to add around kind of the dynamic and how we made it work.
Well, it's more just like, so at the beginning, it was definitely like a little bit of a challenge. I set up this like transition structure for us where Mark would, on Friday nights, or Sundays, he would get a coaching conversation with me, and he would have one section of the week where he could bring anything coaching related, and I would come as an athlete, not as his girlfriend at the time. But then to help the transition, I got a slot on Friday night where Mark needed to come as my boyfriend, and we got to talk about anything I wanted to about our relationship. So
Feeling Fridays.
Pardon?
Feeling Fridays.
Fridays. Yeah, so we had a great Feeling Friday stretch for a while, but then eventually like we just adapted. And like now it's funny how, you know, at the end of the day, like I get to live with someone who is my coach and life partner, who wants me to be better in every single way. And so how cool is that? Like he's not telling me what I want to hear. He holds up a mirror and shows me how I'm showing up. And I would say his coaching doesn't just like, it's not just, you know, workouts. He also just helps me be a better person, not to get all mushy, but like, that's how we make it work, is that it's the best way. Like, I'm like, I would never not want to be married to someone who's like being married to a coach is the best thing in the world. You have a built-in cheerleader and person who's like holding you accountable. Like that's what I want in life. So, I'd say we're making it work. It's pretty great. All good. Yep.
Just gonna grab water. Hello, it's me.
Nice.
6 o'clock at Brown's. You good?
I will do my very best. Hope we wrap this soon then, because I have been
Yeah.
one a heck of a day.
I think we're almost there.
Yeah, it's good though.
So yeah, I think Mark, you answered that fairly well. I think most people listening. I mean, I have to ask, like, what are your days like? So you're full-time coach, Mark, Jess, you're director in communications. Like, how do you ensure that you are getting the amount of volume in? You both obviously are busy folks. Is it easier because you both have the shared passion? Like, how do you prioritize that you're getting this stuff in?
Get up early, because some of my work weeks are like 70 hours on average. So like I work a lot. So up at like 4:35 to make sure that all my training is in, and then go to work, and then come home and work out again, and then go to sleep. And that is my life when I'm in a training block, which is why training for an Ironman over the summer was hard. I did make a lot of sacrifices for it. It wasn't just like all fun and games. And that's also why we cycle in and out, because I don't want to paint it that we have this like monk-like existence where we have zero fun. But we phase it in, and we're really intentional about different seasons throughout the year. Because I think to make anything, like especially any sort of like athletic lifestyle sustainable, you have to be able to have, cycles of like fun and recovery with cycles of just like pure focus and sending it. But I don't know, Mark, do you have anything else you want to say about your day to day?
No, I obviously have a little bit more flexibility than Jess in that my those morning workouts that we're going to, like I'm often running them as the coach of the workouts, so it's kind of a nice combo when you've made your passion into your job. It makes things a lot easier. So I still prefer, like, I still have so many of the same things that I had when I had like a full-time structured like 9 to 5 job, is that I love to like get my workouts done and stuff in the morning and then get into my work day right away. I just find you have a much better work day that day when you've knocked off that training and it's not lingering on your mind all day. So very similar day to Jess, in that I like to get up early, do my work during the day, and then work out again at night.
And we didn't talk too much about recovery or nutrition, but like obviously, like if you're waking up, like are you guys like in bed before 8:30, 9 o'clock? Like some people I talk to.
That's a pretty standard bedtime for us.
Isn't it depressing? I hate it.
I don't mind everything.
It's the sacrifices we make.
I know. It's like birds are chirping and the sun is fully out, and we're like,
especially in the summer. Yeah, it's the worst. We're going to bed now before our kids. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Sorry, going back to recovery or nutrition, like obviously you were talking about maturity through sport and maturity through sort of experience in doing races. Have you found you've also matured or sort of started changing and shifting things from a recovery and nutrition standpoint? Would you say a lot of maybe those two areas have really helped you succeed this year with your success?
100%. So I sleep way more than I ever used to. I would average close to 8 hours every single night. Before it would be more like 6.5, 7. So I've really pushed that. I started using a Whoop to start like tracking things and to play around with different things. And just to see how, like, and just the accountability of seeing that number of hours you slept every night. So by that, I just increased it. And then in terms of nutrition, like especially in endurance sports, it's something I'm really vocal on, because there's a lot of women who don't eat enough. And I think that that's been a key to my success is I replace everything I burn. So I eat a lot. And so I'm really mindful of that. Like eating's like a full-time job. So increasing the amount of food that I eat to make sure that I'm fueling the work, I think is a reason why I was able to do such like intense training, intense amounts of like things thrown at my body. And I think it's a combo of, keeping that strength work in there, doing lots of squats and deadlifts and plyometrics to keep the body strong, but then also fueling the work. And drinking enough water, and doing all the really obvious things that no one else is doing. And it's funny how like you don't really need recovery boots. You just need to sleep, and you need to drink water and eat enough food. That's like, if you do that, that's 95% of it.
Yeah, it's so simple, right? I mean, the fitness industry in general has taken advantage of like Normatex and percussion guns and stuff like that, and those are all, I mean, they're all great tools. But yes, if you just keep it simple, sleeping good food goes a long way for sure. What is the celebratory food that day or day after? Like, what are you divulging into to replenish the fuel, to replenish the body?
I always want like meat. So like I always love like the night,
like a Brazilian steakhouse kind of thing.
After my favorite meal after an Ironman, truthfully, is like a huge steak with vegetables, because you've had so many carbs in that day that you just want like something like heavy and and you want some vegetables.
Yeah.
Because actually leading into the race, you start easing up on vegetables because you don't want too much fiber on race day. Mm-hmm. So I crave that, and then there's always a burger that's in there somewhere. And then in this particular race, I won a bottle of wine. So nice glass of wine with the steak. It was just, yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. So what's next? So like you win Ironman Canada. Does that mean anything? Does this qualify for another race?
So I qualified for the Ironman World Championships in Kona, Hawaii. So I'm going to go do that next October. So
amazing. So we're September. Would this be the end of the Ironman season, triathlon season?
No, we have one more. Well, Mark has a really big race. Is it in next weekend?
Yep.
Yeah. So he's a half Ironman, and then we have Utah, which is the 70.3 or half Ironman World Championships at the end of October, and then we're in off season.
And so Mark, would this be your A+ race coming up, and then Jess, would this be another A+ race, or is it sort of just another race for you?
Yeah, I'd say this one's definitely my A+ race coming up. I get to go head to head with Coach ADJ, so calling him out on the podcast. Yes. I just put up a nice Instagram battle photo for us, so getting excited for that.
He's got a lot of FOMO not being here, I'm sure.
It's all right. We'll solve this on the Barrelman race course. But yeah, that's kind of my A race, and then I'm not taking Utah quite as seriously, but I think Jess wants to kind of rebound and go big at that race. So
yeah, I wanna go full send on it. I wouldn't call it the same A+ as an Ironman, but like, so let's maybe call it an A- race, where I'm like, I'm gonna send it. Yes, I do. I was saying to Mark, like, what's super cool, and sort of a little like overwhelming is some of the major goals that I'd set like for my lifetime to reach in triathlon, I've met. So now I'm like, sort of, now what? Now let's move the goalposts. Like, I'm not just going to rest on my laurels. Like, let's go for the next mountaintop. So in the spring, I want to go for a sub 250 marathon, which is a big goal for me. I think, long term, I'd love to like keep seeing that get faster. I want to smash Finland and Kona, which are World Championships events. And then I'm going to keep looking at how to elevate my game. I'm going to keep getting better at triathlon. So yes, I've got lots of big goals that I'm working with Mark on. Yeah. Yeah, like we get to do Finland next year. Like I would never have chosen to go to that country, but like now we're going and it's going to be amazing.
for Mark, I know that we haven't really talked too much about the LP Endurance crew exactly, but I know you guys have a bunch of races. You were talking about Barrowman. The team, I mean, obviously during Jess's race, we've highlighted Jess, but I know there's a lot of athletes that day that had great days. But you guys have a full-fledged, I guess September is a big month for you guys for some more races, not just triathlon, but endurance in general.
Yeah, so kind of 3 big races that we have a bunch of athletes going to coming up. So Barrowman coming up next weekend, which is a half Ironman distance, 70.3. And then our runners get to launch into action in October. So at Toronto Waterfront, we got a bunch of people racing the half and full marathons that have been putting in a lot of work. So excited to see how they do. And then I think we got probably like 10 to 15 going there for that. And then again, we have a huge group going to Utah for 70.3 World Championships. So I think we're up to about 14 for that race as well. So it's going to be a crazy race and crazy hills by red rocks. It's going to be a pretty epic race to finish off the year for the club. And then we'll be working on our foundation season and how we can get better for 2023 coming up. Lots of big races planned there too. I got to go try and get my Kona slot now so we can sync up. And
yeah, you don't want to be coaching that one.
No,
you can't be stressed out in a place like that.
I'm going to Texas in April to throw down, so we'll see. I got to set my eyes on that and start training now to be as good as Jess. She has the host record now for Ironman, so I'm going to take that back, which is frustrating.
And I told him I'm going to just the following weekend take our household marathon record. So we just keep challenging each other to be faster.
Killing me over here. I got to slow down with this coaching.
There you
it's
go.
A good problem to have.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it's amazing hearing your story. I mean, it's amazing. Me not being in endurance, not knowing too much about endurance, I'm learning more and more, so that's good. But I think it sounds like it's a pretty big deal. So it's pretty cool that you crushed it. It's pretty cool. We have such a cool community in our area that seems like everyone's improving. So, I mean, coach, you're doing something right. And
sure is.
Your athletes seem to be maturing on pace.
That's the goal.
Amazing. Well, congrats. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing and just kind of coming on and talking about this. Is kind of a cool podcast. I hope everyone enjoys it.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Chad. That was fun.
No problem. No problem. Thanks everyone for listening. And yeah, if anyone is inspired by this story, please, our LP Endurance crew is happy to take on new members. Growing. Making it a team sport. Love it. Anyways, yes, thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you later.